Have things been a bit tense lately in your relationship and you feel like you just can't really see eye to eye and you're feeling like the only option is to break up? Well, you're in the right place to learn how to fix your current biggest issue. I'm going to reveal the biggest question you need to ask yourself when a fight breaks out in your relationships, as well as the 7 key principles known as the DESOLVE conflict system to resolving conflicts in your relationships. I'm James King and I'm going to teach you how to blow a woman's mind inside and outside the bedroom. Now, a huge part of outside the bedroom is knowing what to do when conflict arises, especially in your relationships. I mean, come on, man. You love this woman, right? Otherwise, why would you be with her? And I'm betting things are feeling really shit right now. Always fighting or just not being able to get past this current blow up. It sucks, man. I've been there. Years ago, I had a really terrible relationship. It taught me the most important and the most amount of lessons about relationships, and especially what I'm about to teach you in this video. Though at the time, I just could not work this shit out, man. I was always miserable and it felt like nothing was right. We were always in some kind of argument and it really sucked. I felt like I just couldn't do anything right and the smallest thing became the biggest issue. I'm telling you this because if you've been through that or you currently are going through something similar, you aren't alone. But to get out of all the constant bickering and arguing, first, you have to understand what led you to this point. And the simplest and most common reason is that people just do not know how to communicate around conflict. Imagine if they actually taught this stuff in schools. The world would be a very different place. So here is how it usually goes. Scenario 1. Sarah has a problem with Jack, and because Sarah doesn't know how to deal with conflict healthily, she may bring it up in a way that is quite accusatory or attacky that makes Jack very defensive, which then leads to a lot of tension and emotions that they just can't solve. Now in scenario 2, let's say Sarah does actually know how to get her point across in an amazing way. But then no matter how she does it, Jack just doesn't know how to respond to conflict and tension. So he arcs up and he bites back at her. Both scenarios lead to the same outcome. One or both of them hurt and a lot of resentment and tension building up. And not the fun kind of tension. What good conflict resolution takes is both healthy communication and healthy response. And because no one is taught this, we usually tend to just avoid conflict altogether rather than deal with the issue. And that just leads to a lot of problems. And what tends to happen then is once the tension builds up and explodes, we end up arguing at a surface level and not getting to the root cause. I can tell you now, an argument about the dishes, it's rarely ever actually an argument about the dishes. That has just been the final trigger in a series of underlying issues. Okay, now, if you've watched this far, I'm going to assume that you're at this point right now, and you want to know what you can do to resolve things and end the fighting. Well, first up, you need to answer this question that not many people consider or want to think about. Is this honestly the relationship and the person you want to fight for? Let me explain. Most of the time we get comfortable in the safety of our relationships even when we know it's bad for us. We just keep getting into more and more arguments. And what's the point of constant turmoil if you don't honestly see a future with this person? Relationships are hard and they won't always be smooth sailing. So you need to consider if you will put yourself through all this hardship and all this problem solving if at the end of the day you feel this isn't the right person for you. Now, say you can give a definitive answer as yes, this is the person I'm going to fight for no matter how tough it gets because I do see a future. Great. Then you're going to love the next 7 principles that are known as the DESOLVE conflict system. This is going to help you get past your current conflict and into a better place one way or another. Okay, so now before we get into that, if you have gotten some value from this video so far, hit the like and subscribe button to get more videos about how to save your relationships and enhance your bedroom skills. Okay, so now let's get into the 7 principles. The DESOLVE conflict system. Deal with it. As soon as tension arises, address it as soon as possible. If you let it go, we tend to dwell and let things fester. So to prevent things from escalating and causing bigger issues in your relationships, tackle it when it happens. Engage calmly. You want to avoid getting heated. Yelling and emotional reactions can lead to unproductive conversations where the goal becomes more about hurting the other person rather than working together to fix the current issues. Seek to understand. This is a crucial aspect of effective communication. Misunderstandings are going to arise from your differing perspectives, where your meaning and interpretation of the event and their meaning and interpretation of the event are completely different. You both might feel the other is in the wrong based on your own biases, but if you were to take the time to see things from their perspective, you might realize you would have come to the same conclusion if you were in their position. So seeking to understand each other's viewpoints is essential. Open your ears. Most times we get so caught up thinking about how we're going to respond, we completely miss the point our partner is trying to get across, which just adds more fuel to the fire of the argument. Now, active listening is a fundamental communication skill. It involves not just hearing the words, but truly understanding the other person's feelings and concerns, which you can't do if you aren't present and you're only focused on yourself and whatever your response is going to be. Now, let's be specific. You want to get specific about the cause of the problem, the triggers and why the tension arose with you, and what is the ideal outcome you want from going into this conflict. If you don't know what you want out of this, how are they going to know? So work out what your need is. Is it an acknowledgement? Is it an apology? Is it a change of behavior? And so on, whatever it is. You need to know what you actually want out of this so you can effectively communicate it to your partner so that they can then meet that outcome and the expectation. Now, a quick side note here is that a lot of people go into arguments not knowing what they actually want to get out of it. And because of that, both parties just get hurt. Let's take Sarah and Jack from earlier. If Sarah doesn't have a clear idea of what outcome she wants, Jack could really be putting in a lot of effort to try and resolve things, and it still doesn't seem to change anything because he's not able to do the one thing Sarah actually needs to move on. And this makes her more frustrated, which then makes Jack feel like he just can't do anything right, and it's just a vicious spiral down to unhappiness and an eventual breakup. Now, comment below if you've ever had that kind of experience before. Did you manage to work things out, or was that just the beginning of the end? Let me know your story and how things went in the comments. Now, back to the sixth principle. Value focus. Avoid distractions and sidetrack arguments. Most arguments will usually devolve into tit for tat. For instance, Jack might retort something like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but what about when you did XYZ? And then Sarah comes back with yet another grievance of hers, and all this does is bring everything you swept under the rug till now to the surface without actually solving anything, because you're just trying to one-up each other into who is the bigger victim. Ultimately, this is going to leave you both feeling lost, as there's now this huge mountain of issues that seem impossible to get through. To find a proper resolution, you need to focus on one issue, see it all the way to the conclusion, and then go back and address any other grievance and issue that came up. So when Jack threw out his, what about when you did XYZ? The best thing Sarah could do is acknowledge it and keep the conversation focused. Something like this. Okay, I hear you with that, Jack. Sounds like we need to talk about it. Let's wrap up this topic and this issue first, and then I want to hear you out on what you're bringing to the table. Does that sound fair? See, this way, you both will always feel acknowledged and heard by your partner, and you can actually solve each small issue as a team. And finally, the last principle, embrace forgiveness. This means once this conversation and conflict reaches its conclusion, you need to let it go and move past the issue. You don't make little comments or hold onto this to use later against your partner. You agree to move on, and you move on. If you can't forgive and move on from this, you may have to reassess the whole relationship, because holding on to this will forever be an underlying issue which one or both of you is always going to hold resentment for. Now, this final principle of forgiveness relates all the way back to that starting question I told you to ask yourself. Because if you have a desired outcome for this conflict about what you need from your partner, they give it to you, and you still can't move on and forgive, then this answers that question for you. This isn't the relationship or the person you want or you're willing to fight for. And it's time to walk away instead of letting this issue fester until it eventually does blow up months or years later, causing you both a lot more hurt. Now, once you do get through those, the next step is to learn how you can avoid arguments altogether, which you can do in my upcoming videos.